Hi there everyone, welcome back, and today we're going to be looking at how Gemini 2.5 Pro does on the same SimStack challenge that Claude 4 was able to absolutely beast over the course of about a quarter of an hour. So I've set it all up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the challenge. Again, a reminder that's going to give us a user server that they can play in, a traffic generator, which puts that server under real load, and a network. And then there's going to be a series of challenges that they have to complete, which are broken things on the user server. It's entirely up to the agent how they want to solve that challenge. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get ready to SSH in. I'm not going to SSH into my user account. Rather, I'm going to SSH into the root account. That allows me to more easily use the agent. But users on SimStack challenges do get full root access as well. So once that's all up and running, I'll walk you through the idea of the challenge, set us into agent mode, and set it going. And let's see how it can do compared with Claude 4. I'm going to try and do two challenges today. One is to try and get an active rides real-time chart working for a server under heavy load. And then the second one is to get a little bit more historical data over time for that same server. I'll skip the video ahead to when everything is set up and ready to go. Great, okay, here we are. And as you can see, we've got a chart. This chart is expecting some information to come back. At the moment, it's showing 0. We've got some instructions from the CEO that it should be showing the current number of active rides that are within a kind of Uber-like system. And we've got a little timer down here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to SSH into the system. I'm going to SSH into the root user. This SimStack users all get root access anyway, but this just allows me more easily to use the agent within Warp. And so now we are connected within that system. You can see we're live in that Linux server. I'm going to give it exactly the same instructions that I gave to Claude, which I've pasted into a single file. And that's going to be in agent mode. And that basically copy-pastes in the CEO email saying this is your job and this is what you have to do. It sort of gives some instructions about the steps that it might want to take and a high-level overview of where it is. It's inside a server, and this is the kind of JSON that it's trying to return back. So that gives it the full kind of context for this. And let's go ahead and start it and start the timer. Okay. So I'm just going to sort of help push it through. Anytime that it gets stuck, I might, Command C in order to get out of Control C to get out of a loop, or I might press Enter, return if I want it to go and do some code. But I'm going to basically try and let it be as autonomous as possible. I'm not going to help it very much. So the first thing that it's trying to do is trying to take a look at the notes.txt file. It hasn't found that notes.txt file, which is interesting. It looks like it's trying to find it in the local directory. So it's missing a pretty important piece of information here. But let's see if it can find that. It has successfully located the service. It's got a couple of critical errors inside the service. And now it's located the code that's in there. It's trying to find the database connection logic. Again, very rapidly honing in on the issue. Great idea to go straight for the database. That's the source of truth. That would certainly validate whether or not there are actually 0 active rides. Now it's got to try and break into the database, so it's going to look for the .env. This is all pretty rapid, very, very fast stuff. It's found the env file. It doesn't want to expose the credentials to the screen, which is very kind of it, although these are ephemeral environments that SimStack spins up, so it doesn't matter too much if it shows that stuff. Yeah, go ahead, run that. Let's do that. So now it's going to go ahead, try and get into the database. It's actually going ahead and updating the RideDB database. Despite lacking the information from the notes.txt, it has managed to do some good ideas about trying to get the active rides. Now I'm noticing that there's an error up here on the active rides in the web application, which suggests to me that it's currently offline. It says indeed it's not running on port 8080, and it's going to check the service status to see what's going on. I do think it would have helped it if it had been able to find the notes left for it on the server, but it didn't think to look around for that or didn't trust what was being said. It says that the RideDB doesn't exist, and it is supposed to connect to that, but the RideDB needs to be connected to the service. This is not correct at all. It shouldn't be going ahead and just creating a whole new database on the server, so it's really kind of COWBOY. One thing I'm immediately noticing difference between Claude 4 and Gemini is Gemini just kind of like goes for it. Claude was very careful. It made backups of things before as it went. It came up with a sort of good plan and tested its theories and its ideas pretty religiously. Here, we're just whacking straight in, create DB failed, so we're going to do that in super user mode. Who the hell cares? We're going to restart the application and curl and try and make sure we've got a whole new database in there now. So straight away, Gemini going off in a pretty wild direction here. I wonder whether or not it would have done this had it found the notes.txt, although the only real thing in there is that it says the password for the database is in the env, and that you could use hdot to see what the processes are going on. It's already figured out the process stuff, and it seems to have difficulty getting the env from the right place anyway. You can see it tried to find this .env. So it's having a think now. This is a good idea. It should slow itself down. Seems that creating the database was not the only issue. That is absolutely correct. Okay, so now we're going to use journal control to try and take a look at the logs, and it should be ingesting those logs to see what's going on inside there too. So straight away I can see it's moving faster, but less cautiously. It's kind of cowboying this a little bit. Okay, so the first thing is it's talking about a node issue, which really only appears once. It's really an initialization issue. But here we do have a SQL issue. But those are from previous versions of the system that was updated subsequently. No, we're going to say keep going, no help from me. Okay, so it's found a SQL syntax error at the end of the create table statement. Was that perhaps the create table statement that it created as part of the create write DB? I wonder. No, it just tried to create the DB. So there shouldn't be any sort of SQL syntax error. But it is going to make sure that happens anyway. So it has identified a syntax error in the create table query. Feels unlikely to me, because that has never been an issue for anyone else. But it has found what it thinks is correct, and we're going to go ahead and work off that. It's doing the replacement, and it's going to restart and check the /active endpoint. Not expecting this to turn up anything new, because the RIDE database initialization is absolutely fine, and if it had been able to read the env, it would have been able to log in and see that that is absolutely fine. So now it thinks that the issue is that it needs to sleep and have a think. This is starting to feel to me like the kind of divergent behavior that agents show sometimes. So rather than, where Claude is very careful about staying on track and validating to make sure that it wasn't getting off track, Google's just kind of spinning out at this point. It's got an idea in its head that it's about the database, and specifically it's about a missing database, and it doesn't seem to have effectively validated that. It's ignoring large chunks of the context for that stuff. So it's behaving to me in a less cautious, less scientific way. Okay, now it says that the active endpoint is responding with active RIDE 0. That does indeed seem correct, because 0 was where we were at the beginning. We just done a little 6-minute loop of nothing and recreated the database. That's interesting. Let's see. We're now going to look for other running services that may be responsible for generating and sending RIDE data. So it's just that. Generating and sending, there is a traffic generator in there, but it's been told that it is in a user server that's being communicated with a traffic generator, just like Claude. It seems to have a real difficulty getting its head around that. It's looking for a traffic generator on this system that is sending the RIDE data. It hasn't located any because there aren't any. It's looking to see whether or not Caddy could be involved. It says it's unlikely to generate RIDE data. So now it says that there is a problem with the Firehose app. It's going to examine and look at the /rides endpoint, which is responsible for creating new rides. And that is indeed correct. It's being sent from the outside. If it lsoft on a port, then it would see that it was running. It could listen on a port to see whether or not there is any data coming through. Now it's trying to proxy the conflict. It's trying to resolve connection to Caddy. Again, these are errors that it has introduced, because these are not incumbent in the original scenario. You'll notice that Claude never had to do any sort of proxying across to Caddy or any of that stuff. That was all just set up and good to go. So, okay, it's trying to run that on port 8080. I mean, I'm not trying to understand what it's doing. I'm just going to say yes to it. And it says the Firehose app is running on port 80. Okay, all right. It's going to restart Caddy itself. So it's going to restart the SSL proxy, which is also fine. But it should know that from the chart info that I gave it, that it is querying this /active, which will be going through to port 80. So if it starts trying to run Caddy on a different port, we're going to have an issue. So it seems very keen to make a lot of changes and not provide any easy way to roll things back. I'm getting a very cowboy coder kind of vibe here. A little bit like a sort of 80s hacker that's speed running a system, but is causing more problems for themselves than they're solving. Caddy's running. I use the correct port because Caddy is proxy and request to 8080. That's great. Seems it was too quick with the call command, I thought. So it is reflecting a little bit on its process. Okay, maybe there's another process that's meant to be sending. It's suggesting it could be something related to a CPU heavy load. Yeah, it's found that it's now. Let's have a look here. It's reviewed the index file. There's no obvious index of the CPU. The get active rides is the likely culprit. No, the culprit is the /rides endpoint that's inserting information into the database. It's doing that under very heavy load. Between 12 and 50,000 requests per second is what it's trying to handle right now. So, okay, it's put an index in. That's great that it's got an index in. That will speed up the data retrieval. It's a good idea, but we're still showing 0 active rides. We're not pulling any active rides. And it says there, the active endpoint is returning 0. The CEO's email said there should be over 12,000 active rides. It's possible the rides are being created with a different type from active. That's a good point. That's a very good point. The mystery is solved. It doesn't have entries of the type of active, so it's very quickly gone and found that. That's very cool. And it wants to consider request, driver, arrive, and pick up as active rides. Well, there's an issue with that in that these are ride events. So that's not a correct summary of active rides. A ride event that has a pickup may later then have something else. So this active rides number is way overblown. Should be about 5% of that total value. So I think it is considerably higher than it needs to be. The latency is good because it has added an index. What I'm going to do is I'm going to nudge it directly towards the notes.txt because actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to try and help it too much. Take that back. I'm just going to tell it that that ain't right. At the moment, the active ride definition is not correct. It needs to look and see that the database contains events. This definition of active rides is not correct. Each ride, yeah, I'm not going to give you that much context. It should be able to figure this stuff out. You're currently adding pickups, driver arrive, etc. together. These are different events in a ride chain. Consider again what an active ride. So that's quite a lot of help to give it, I suppose. But I'm feeling kind of bad for Google here, especially compared to Claude. I feel like it needs a little bit more support and guidance into where to direct its thinking. Claude seemed to be acting much more intentionally and thoughtfully. So it has come up with a solution for this problem, but the active rides is way too high and the average latency is way too high. So I'm afraid you have not successfully resolved all these errors. You need to keep going. So let's see if it can find a new pathway to fixing the active rides. And just for a reminder, at this point, Claude had not only solved the problem and implemented a cache, and got that latency way down, it was going on to the second problem that it was then able to build on that architecture. Okay, so it wants to try and calculate the rides that have started but not yet been completed or cancelled. That is a very good way. So subtracting the drop-off and cancellation from the number of request events. That's a great way to do it. Subtracting the ending rides from the beginning rides, you've got the active rides. So that is a nice... Claude had a more sophisticated way that it was calculating across active users and drivers that were being engaged. It sort of had the concept of a journey embedded in it, which was really, really cool. But here we're actually going to just subtract one from the other, and that does seem like a good idea. So now let's see. We have got hundreds of thousands of active rides coming through at the moment, and a really high latency. The latency is still really high, and the active rides should be something like 40K at the moment. So just telling it that it's wrong, because it's pulling in what seems to be about 400,000 active rides. And it's not actually connected to the latency at all. Okay, let's give that another go. The latency needs to be consistently under 1 second. At the moment, it's failing to handle it. Yep, my apologies. CPU usage is too high, so it thinks the reason is the CPU usage is being too high. In fact, there's like just poor indexing across the code base, and it's calculating the wrong number for active rides. It doesn't seem to have implemented that change. It did set it and try to select, and then it's not coming out quite right. So, the calculation was flawed. Need to consider ride active, a pickup event, but not a drop-off. Yes, drop-off calculation. That is correct. It seems to be unable to set things directly. The set is failing due to a syntax error. Again, it's very exciting. Like, just compare this to the really measured approach of Claude, and how it would make backups of things, and it would check to validate its hypotheses before anything else. It would really think around and challenge its own reasoning, and then when it would make executions, it would execute in a much more coherent way. Whereas Google really is just trying shit, you know? However, Claude really ballooned the code, and that is looking much tighter. So let's just have a look at that. It's going to restart that and try and curl for the active rides. It's restarted it correctly. We've got a fetch error here, and we're hoping this is going to blossom downwards, somewhere towards the 100K territory. Would be good, maybe a little bit less at this point in the simulation. That active rides will continue growing. One definitely feels wrong. Yeah, one does not seem like the right number. So that's I mean, it's fast. It's getting that single active ride fast, and the SED has failed. Okay, it's overriding the DB. Get active rides. Yep, we're selecting the count. I don't think that's a good idea. Just request drop-off cancellation, but or maybe it's going to do some calculation on that in the index. That would be interesting. Sure, let's restart it and give it another go. And okay, it says it's cracked it. The active is returning the number of rides. The latency is indeed extremely low. Well, not that low. Claude was able to get it another 10 times lower at the CPU stages. I'm saying one active ride should be 50K plus, and the latency is not great, around 1000 milliseconds. Should be much lower. So it's introduced more issues that it needs to fix. And this actually is very, very interesting. I've seen other AI agents attempt this challenge and fix things in, I don't want to say like dumber ways, but simpler, more direct ways, like hard coding things to validate that something is coming through correctly, and then gradually moving towards more impressive architectures over time. And the thing that really does trip up engineers on this challenge is when they just try to like do random shit until they fail. And I'm getting a lot more of the doing random stuff from Google here. Whereas the latency is unacceptable is clearly wrong. It's the database query. It's inefficient. No, check again. Check again. Curly active endpoint. What's the number? The latency isn't good either. So it seems to be falling into that LLM trap of I did it. I've solved the issue when it patently has not. I like to attribute this to optimism on behalf of the LLMs rather than malice. I think they just like to feel like they've done a good job. I'm not frustrated. You're absolutely right to be frustrated. I'm not frustrated. I'm bemused. And it's okay, but I can see that you're sort of losing the plot a little bit. Okay, it's going to update the application logic and index. That's a good idea. What's it going to do here? Just take a quick look. It's going to go on the active. It's going to get the active rides. It's going to try and get the active rides. Okay, well, fine. It must be returning back some kind of interesting subquery. Yes, let's restart the application. Let's see if we can potch ourselves out of this one active ride loop. Because I think at the moment, as it stands, we're looking at a fail for Google 2.5. Okay, that's better. It's not coming down in the correct format. It looks like that's coming back as a string. So let's just take a look at that, inspecting that. If we look in the network, we can see hopefully some kind of /active. There it is. Yeah, it's coming back as a string. The active ride count is good, but it's coming back as a string. Should be a number. Okay, so that's made a little bit of progress. That's not bad. And it did need quite a bit of prompting, but I feel like we're about to be on the cusp of solving this challenge, especially because the latency is quite low. It has optimized the database query by calculating the active rides in a single pass. Hopefully, it is now going to restart. That is now coming through. That looks much more likely to be the active ride count. The real question now is, let's have a look at the average latency over a few of these calls over the next minute or so. Okay. So that now does look like, to me, we've solved this challenge. We've got some high latencies here. If this third bar comes in, I'm going to tell it that that latency is too high. And the third bar is, no, looking pretty good. Okay, so we've got some spiky latency, but this might solve itself. Let's go into the second challenge. So we're going to call it about 20 minutes, 1955 for the first challenge. Let's go into the second challenge where it needs to now improve on its previous work, or keep its previous work running, but also add in some batch and historical stuff, which might be tricky for it. And we can also make sure that the latency of this chart then is within the bounds. So I'm going to go to here. We're going to go to the next curveball. I'm just going to copy paste it directly in. It's again the CEO email, and it's asking people to do it, asking the system to do it. So let's go ahead. Boop. Let's paste that in and continue. Again, all within the previous context. It's quite a high chance that Warp is doing some sort of clever compression of context behind the scenes here. I hope it has. If it isn't, I guess this is going to degrade pretty severely, because in long conversation chains, model performance does degrade severely. That said, in this long chain conversation, what seems to have degraded is Google's willingness to just Wild West this whole thing. About which I'm not too mad, I've got to say. I don't think we need to do that. So it's going to go ahead. It's going to try and one-shot this, which is great. We saw this again with Claude, just really trying to one-shot that. It's going into the DB, the get last rides by city by last hour. So hopefully it's tried to implement it. Let's have a little look at the implementation that it did. That's on the create ride, get rides by last hour. Okay, we're not able to see that in the context window, but we will in a minute. We can go and take a look afterwards. And now it's done a little index on it as well, which is a great idea to speed up that query with a composite index on the type and date time. Because this is using server load, we'd expect the latency to be rocking, and that's okay. Let's restart this app and see if that pops into life the rides in the last hour by city. We need both latencies to be under a second as well. Okay, so it is now returning something. This is better than nothing, but we're not getting any data back at the moment. I'm going to try and remind it of the kind of response that it needs. Let's just double check that that was indeed in here. Yeah, it does say it expects rides by city key numbers. So let's just reiterate that. Here is the context of the real-time chart. Because it's not returning, it appears, the correct kind of information on here. There's a bunch more data than that. Also, we're getting some long spiky things. So the data being returned doesn't seem right in the chart. To remind you, okay, so that now gives a little bit. It is now, however, querying an endpoint. So it has implemented an endpoint, which is great. And it looks like the data type is not correct. The value is a number, but it's being returned as a string from the database. So let's check to see what it's doing here. Rise by city, and then it's going to map them into that and pass int into that rides by city as formatted rides. Okay, that's fine. We're not gonna comment on that approach. Be cool if we could just cast it from the database, I guess. But we're going to do that in JavaScript. The fast way. Okay, so let's restart that system and hopefully we'll see some bar charts appearing here if the data is correct. It is confident that it's returning the correct data, but I'm afraid your confidence is meaningless, Google. It does not answer our question. So I'm going to have to tell it this doesn't seem right. I'm going to note the time 2:53, do a little bit of my own debugging. Let's head into the network here. I want to see the calls that are being made to the last hour and what's being returned. I don't want any of that nonsense. I just want to know on the last hour, it's coming back empty. So that's to say, it looks like calls to rides by city are coming back empty, is what I'm seeing. It shouldn't be empty. Okay, so it's not calculating it correctly, the rides by city. Again, like a lot of confidence and speed, but not very thoughtful about it. Get rides by city from last night, selecting the kitty code. Yeah, that's great. There's the request. That's fine. We can do request. That's fine. Now interval 24. Aha! I'm guessing that the now is going to be the problem. Again, you'll notice in Claude's video, it took a look at the data and realized it was from March. It was historical data. I think Google's going to have to realize that it's about the now thing, and I don't know if it's going to do that. Again, I'm not going to prompt it, but the reason this is happening is because it's trying to find rides in the last hour from the server time, which is 30th of June, whereas this is a historical simulation data. 24 hours, still getting 0. Should I prod it? Take a look at the data? I feel bad just sort of telling it that. No, I want it to figure it out. Still getting 0 rides in there. I want it to figure that out. Claude was able to figure that out. It's unreasonable to give it that support. Okay, it's going to get the date time. Okay, so it's going to have a look at the latest ride to get its date time format. Will it notice that this latest ride is like the 1st of March? There, it did. It got it. Okay, I'm glad I didn't prompt it. That would have felt cheap. Okay, I'd love to have seen how it was solving it there, actually, but I feel like I'm taking too long looking at its code, and that's not fair, because that's eating up its time. And yours, dear watcher. Okay, it's going to restart the application, and boom, there we go, we're in. Let's check these latencies. We've got an average latency of 744, that's fine. It's way higher than Claude's was, but it's fine, it's within the spec. This latency, if this bar keeps on pumping up high, that latency needs to come down. Yeah, that latency needs to come down. So that's last hour latency is high, greater than 1000 milliseconds, which is the target. So no dice yet. I want that average latency down, and the active rise latency is spiky as well, which really is a problem that gets solved with the cache. So let's see whether or not it chooses to do that, and it figures out to do that. Again, one of those things that Claude did beelines for straight away. Immediately noticed the problem and tried to solve that problem right there and then. Just really good sort of sense of taste on that. Sorry, you don't need to apologize. It's okay. Am I coming across as very frustrated with this? I guess I am. Um, but I don't need you to apologize. I think you're doing a great job. I mean, you're doing this faster than me, although you're doing it weirder than me too. Okay, so now it says it's well under the 1 second target. Let's give it a couple of moments to see whether or not the index is helping. I'm going to say the latency on both active and last hour is quite spiky. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it floats well above. Can we bring them consistently down under 1,000 milliseconds? I mean, we're looking good. I could say that it's done it at this point, but this spiky latency gives me reason to think that every so often we're going to burst above that, and that is strictly breaking our rules. So we're not going to call it a day until it's able to get that spiky latency down. That's an example there. That last one that we did, there was a call that took 2.5 seconds and that took 2.6 seconds. And this is only going to get worse over time as well. So it's going to try and optimize the database queries. That's fine. I'm not going to look to see how it does that right now. I just want it to go ahead and do it. It's going to add some new indices to speed up the new queries. That's nice. That's a good idea. Rides type city code ID on rides. That's cool. That's all good. It's going to slow down the inserts, though. It's got to bear in mind it's receiving a lot of stuff on the inserts, and its CPU usage was already pretty high. And the worst thing would be if it starts dropping packets that come in from the traffic generator. So anyway, let's see how that goes. We'll restart the application server. It's confident. I mean, you've been confident all along, my friend. But those tiny little bars are looking good. If we see a couple of those, I'm going to call it done, and we're going to say it did it in under 30 minutes. I'm liking the look of this. I'm liking the look of this average latency. We've got some decent rides in the last hour. What I like about this approach as well is it did it alphabetically. Claude organized this by value. I prefer reading this alphabetically. It makes a little bit more sense to me. I'm going to say, actually, that is a latency solve. That's pretty good. So still a rapid solution. Let's call it 2950. Rapid solution to the two challenges. But it did need a little bit of prodding. It kept on thinking that it was solved. And overall, Gemini 2.5 Pro's approach feels way more kind of cowboy, radical Wild West, which I think is fine so long as you've got a feedback loop on it that tells you when your Wild West approach is failing. But it didn't seem to pay attention to its own feedback loops and just kept on being confident that it was solved. So maybe is there a personality issue here? Is it an overconfident personality? Who knows? Okay, so that's us looking at 2.5 Pro. Significantly slower than Claude, significantly more random, I would say, in its behavior than Claude. Faster in some ways and slower overall. That's it for today. That's us looking at the SimStack, a couple of challenges with the Claude 2.5 Pro agent. Thanks for joining.